In the mountains here is the ancient Rukai settlement of Kucapungane, and me and a bunch of artists went to go and understand this ancient place. We were driven along the riverbed to the beginning of the trail where we would begin our ascent. And after a quick ceremony, we were off, climbing up the trail into the mountains, the signs of ancient habitation still visible.
Wow. Wow. 好漂亮 Like you. Yeah. No, I'm not like that. 好漂亮哦，这个人。
像那个以前老人家在田里面。
Although, as you'll see, it's mostly in ruins today, Kucapungane was established in at least the 1400s, if not earlier, and is the ancestral home of many Rukai people, one of the prominent indigenous peoples of southern Taiwan. A revitalization began when the writer and poet Chiu Ba of Vinikalus came back to his childhood home and began rebuilding his house. The slate homes are trademarked to southern Taiwan, with the Rukai, the Paiwan, and the southern Vunong. Many generations, hundreds, were born in the slate house and died in the slate house. 大只出来了。
哦，大只的。
对，他来了。These slate houses are made without mortar or cement traditionally. They are smartly stacked, as are the wooden beams above. Smoke from the hearth would traditionally keep insects away and also cure the wooden beams. The wooden beams themselves would have to be turned over about every 2 years, as eventually, under the weight of the slate roof, they would sag. This kind of home is meant to be lived in. The smoke, the occasional maintenance, it's what allows this durable home to last centuries upon centuries. Traditionally, the deceased are buried 2 meters underneath each slate house, although family members who died of starvation or certain other situations would be buried outside. These homes were also easy to defend, traditionally with the entrance in the front where the roof slopes down. An intruder would have to duck down in order to get in, and that makes them vulnerable to getting beheaded. Look carefully. The roads here used to be paved with smooth slate, connecting all the different families living here. Almost 200 of them. You can see layers upon layers, terraces on this slope, now overgrown with vegetation, but once was a thriving, illustrious, prestigious Rukai community.
那我先自我介绍一下哦，我叫子告，哎，子告，家名叫鲁乱，那我跟一丹老师，曾经在一所学院，读过书。
We were really fortunate to have had Zagao, a local leader, bring us through Kucapungane and its many layers of history and stories that now rest amongst the rubble and the brush.
人口可能就已经没有办法再负荷这个环境，让来养育那么多的，所以可能所以就有巴达，巴达是敌人哦，巴达，
巴达，
敌人的敌人。
巴达就是指你们了。
比如说你是我是
客人，
我的客人呢，
哎呀，
你是我的敌人的敌人，了解吗？
Vada is an enemy, and Vada Vada is an enemy of my enemy, so possibly a friend. The Rukai were once engaged in fierce tribal warfare and competition with neighboring tribes, and so their warriors had to be formidable. There is a story of a Rukai headhunter who had taken an enemy head, but unfortunately, the victim was diseased, and little did he know he brought the illness back to his family. They were quarantined, and they all perished inside their slate house.
以前是颜色，特基湾的啦，
哦，不对了，
特基湾那个在那古春秀，古春秀，
古春秀他们的养色，
对，
当时有养。
你看那个他去的那个墙是，堆叠的。那这个地方呢，也是常常那个什么，这个可能让家族有跳舞场。
这里。
对。所以围有个圈圈，可能是好几圈。就这样。所以你看这个石板，那头目。
It's hard to imagine the sheer amount of skill, hard labor, and cooperation involved in using chisels to split off perfect pieces of slate and then move them from the quarry all the way to the construction site and then build a house. But the result is one, if lived in and maintained, a home that can last centuries upon centuries.
食材，这个就是
重点还是材料。
对。所以他如果有意愿要去修复家屋的哦，第一个条件，你要有食材。没有食材，你可以跟那个什么以后不会回来的买石板。
他们接的水管。
他们奉献，然后我们委托。那也是我们Kucapungane的人曾经居住过的地方。
是第一个还是第二个？
第二个
那个吗？
第二个对，最高那个地方叫鲁明岸，然后在更高的地方叫巴鲁关，在那个离线后方，在台东的那个地方。以前我们的祖先，我们说，我们走了之后呢，我们的祖先都会在那边居住。那以前我们小时候，这个雀榕哦，常常是我们荡秋千的地方。雀榕。我们已经进入到另外一个聚落了哈。我们说相思树叫达杜咕噜，达杜咕噜。可是这个一直到那个长老教会那边是达杜咕噜。
对，这条街叫达杜咕噜。
对，是那个什么台大城乡所基金会第一个来培养那个什么修复石板屋的一个
There's a legend amongst the Rukai that this settlement, Kucapungane, was founded when they saw a leopard drinking from the water, and while this may or may not be true, their ancestors were wise to found their settlement here, easily defended and with a good source of drinking water nearby, as well as bountiful farmlands, and hunting grounds on the slopes. It's tempting to think of this place as a time capsule, a timeless place of tradition, and while much of it is traditional, it too has been visited by colonization, imperialism, missionary work. It may be considered somewhat remote, but it was never fully disconnected from the forces of the wider world. What a sight it must have been to see terraces, rows upon rows of slate houses, smoke filtering out through their roofs. While imperialism often comes with oppression, it's more nuanced than that. And in this case, we see this structure originally made to honor a Japanese administrator here who seemed to have genuinely cared for the people. He was disgraced and forced to commit suicide, and they honored him with this stele. No easy task. When the Chinese nationalist regime came, they covered it up and decided to commemorate Jingmen with this stone. It's since been cleaned up somewhat. Even atop these mountains, you can't escape the forces of geopolitics. And yet, after the Chinese nationalist regime, Kucapungane is still here, and now it is entering a stage of renewed Taiwanese identity, awareness, renaissance. And I'm hopeful for its future.
公演就是说，可能有一个企业出了这里，然后让大家可以免费。在这里，所以在我看来，对，我不太确定哪一个是哪部分公益，有事业公益，事业的。讲话比较乖吗？
These days, only a handful of people actually live in Kucapungane. Most have gone to the flatlands, the cities, for convenience and opportunity. But some, like Yixiong, the Xiaoliren, this hunter has been living here for most of his life now. He is part of this world, and he can go and get food when he wants. He has those skills, but most don't have the skills developed to his level, and at most, a few people do come seasonally to help rebuild or repair, but most come back fewer than that.
是这样，一个弓这样，这个是卡哦，卡在这个里头，这是踏板，它一踩这个，它就会就会起跳啊。
所以这个是连在这里，但是你画的肚子，一人牵一边，
我不要。
明明就是你的。
Can you imagine people dusting off mats, drying herbs, harvesting, preparing their hunting tools, kids having little mock battles or tagging along, watching their older brothers and sisters?
50、60年代的时候，就我讲的是民国民国50、60年代的时候，因为大家生活形态都改变啊，大家已经习惯用货币那这边根本赚不到钱，那赚不到钱就没有钱去买东西去做一些交易。那我们过去 完全是种地啦，种田地啦，然后自给自足，种什么就吃什么。当生活形态改变以后，我们就发现我们这里没有办法生存，一个一个就往外面迁移。
Can you imagine people telling stories by the fire? Young people partying under the full moon. Elders sharing wisdom.
亲爱的好哥哥，请你不要忘记，是不是这样啊？就是要去当兵2-3年啊。
谢谢制作人，我不会唱这首歌。谢谢红红，谢谢于艳芳。来吧，感谢，台北见，这个继续，拜拜，拜拜，拜拜。
Though this place is in ruins, I leave optimistic. I believe the push for revitalization will only keep getting stronger.
Bye.
好，不要。
Trees younger than the mountains, rolling like a blues country road.
你说哪一个山？
Take me home.
哇！
The regime had moved Kucapungane to this new site, New Haota, but it was wiped out by Typhoon Moruka. And we come to the end of our adventure. Everybody is tired but in good spirits and looking forward to a shower and a cold drink. Thank you to everybody who guided us through Kucapungane and the mountains, shared the stories of the place, and thank you to all my new friends. And thank you for joining me on my journey. I salute yours. Peace.